At times, it looked like you could tell, according to Dave, when Jerry was booking, and it made more sense. But maybe it would have required a little more patience. But for whatever reason, the folks in Dallas at Panda were always sold and committed on giving Vince Russo this opportunity. And Meltzer would basically say he's a good enough salesperson to get himself a $530,000 a year job from WCW, even though he doesn't know a hill of beans about in-ring stuff. I'm curious, from your perspective, do you think you could have or would have or should have made it a year without Russo's booking? If you had just done what Jeff and Jerry wanted to do, could that have made it a year, or was Russo necessary just to keep this train on the tracks?
So here's what's kind of amazing. I'll just say this. Conrad, I don't know how many hours of podcasting you've done, but I'm just going to say collectively, all the research, Bruce, which you covered some TNA time, Eric, you covered some TNA time, JR, I don't think really, Tony, well, I don't know. Anyway, you've done a lot of TNA podcasts, which makes you have to go down different rabbit holes of research. And the reality of the situation is you have your Russo just haters, and then you have his supporters. And then you have, on the other side of the fence, if Jerry would have had the book that first year or whatever it may be. And you just said right then, if Jeff and Jerry had been, okay. And look, my whole time there, we go into in detail, 2002 to 2013, all the ups and downs. Conrad, the real reality of this situation was, just like I wanted Russo and Jim Cornette to work together, oh, that'll never work. Or Russo and Dutch to get in the same room. I'm ultimately responsible for the good or bad. Love me or hate me. Year one was, by design, I'm going to take a little bit of Vince and a little bit of Jerry, and maybe next week I'm going to take a lot of Jerry and less, all that. So could we have made it without Russo year one? Absolutely we could have. Could we have made it without Jarrett year one and all Russo? Absolutely we could have. That's only my opinion. That's subjective. At the end of the day, I ultimately said, this week we're going with these ideas, and next week. So all the screw ups or the successes, ultimately, you got to kind of throw in my lap by design, because I don't think I would say I ever approved everything. I certainly wouldn't approve Vince, not because I'm against foul language, but the FU didn't fit in that segment, or that racial overtone, or not bringing Sabu in, or what, just all the ins and outs. But ultimately, I'm responsible for it, or was responsible for it. So yeah, we could have easily.
Let me say this. You've changed my fandom, and we've talked about this a lot off air. When you said creative is subjective, I was able to apply that to stuff my dad taught me about sales as a kid and all that. I guess what I was trying to ask, and maybe I didn't do the best job of conveying it, was Russo critical to the continued relationship with Panda? Had that relationship become more political? It's written in the Observer that Panda was sold on Russo. And I know at times, whereas maybe guys can subscribe to some tribalism, I know you don't do that. You're like, hey man, it takes a team. Let's all work together and make this thing better. I know that's your approach. But at that point, for this to make the Observer, it makes me say to myself, was Russo already trying to spend a little more time politicking, if you will, with the Panda folks than maybe your dad was?
Like 1,000%. We believed verbatim what was told to us, and I'll just say kind of collectively from Dallas.
Right.
Big issue. We believe, okay, Dallas. I mean, I'll never forget the words I said many times. Jeff, you do the wrestling. We're going to do the legal and finance.
Right.
When she said, when Janice said wrestling, that was marketing and production, and she meant that. But we're going to do legal and finance, and we're going to, you know, the business operations and all that. I believe that wholeheartedly. As time went along, and I get this, Vince is wanting to feed his family and do what he thinks is best, and Dixie Carter being inquisitive, and rightly so, and asking questions and all that. Through that process, I think you just kind of said that, but Vince, maybe not by design from the beginning, but selling himself to Dallas at the same time, the inexperience of the Carter family of truly reading and understanding kind of what we talked about on the CM Punk or the Cena thing. Oh, no, that's a bad thing. They're booing our top babyface. Oh, no. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. Trust me, it's a great thing. Oh, well, that's kind of hard to understand year one from business folks. So kind of the lack of understanding on a deep level of the wrestling industry, and Vince answering questions. I'd give anything. And I think I told that Vince many, many times, Vince, if there's a question you don't want to answer, you can diplomatically say, I'd rather not answer that. And I know he did that on some occasions, but hey, defer, because you're creating me more problems, because all of a sudden everything I'm doing is being second guessed. And there came a time, as time went along, everything I did was second guessed. And that was detrimental to the company, period.
I know your dad even wrote, when you guys first launched this company, the idea is we had to establish you as the top star, not necessarily because this was a promotion designed to get you over the way the haters may say online, but simply because we could control the variables. You're not going anywhere. You're hunkered down. So you're more than just a talent. That makes total sense to me. However, I do want to point out that the naysayers, maybe other wrestlers, would say that the word, or at least Meltzer would write, the word he heard most from wrestlers in the locker room was the word frustration. And there was a perceived glass ceiling, like they could never really be the top guy as long as you were wearing both hats. And even if you go back to, say, the critics of Dusty Rhodes and Jim Crockett Promotions, they would say, well, you can't have a guy who's on the show and a booker. We've heard recent conversation about that a handful of years ago with the EVPs and AEW and all that jazz. And now you're trying to make it work almost out of necessity. And I just want to point out that this is your primary income. It's not like you moonlight in the wrestling business and you're also a data scientist or city engineer. This is it. So you're trying to squeeze out profit. And we're trying to see what works and what doesn't work. And here's something I thought that just jumped off the page in the Observer. When the Jarrett Raven formula worked, which was a 4 or 5 week hard build for one day and one match, it signaled something. Their business is no different from old time wrestling. It was one match, but with weeks of hype. The one match, just a wrestling match, meant more than the girls losing their tops, endless insider interviews, and debates that the live audience shit on. Since that time, after finding a working formula, there have been weeks where not one match is announced the week before. No match has been given more than a week's direct buildup. And even the appearance of Sting, which should have been promoted for a month at least, only had a 1 week build, and the jury is out on how much it will matter. At this point, there's believed to be 30,000 people who are in the universe that on occasion order the shows. It's believed to be bottoming out around 7,500 buys on bad weeks. There was a surge, and they seem to consistently be hitting 13,000. But allegedly, 20,000 people bought you and Raven, and that had to be almost like a eureka moment where I would imagine a guy like your dad was like, damn it, Jeff, the data says we've been overthinking this. We thought we had to have crazy, high-flying, crash TV. What will they do next week? You guys build this Raven Jarrett storyline, which we covered in the archives. At that time, sets a pay-per-view record for y'all. Man, the same thing that has always worked in wrestling still works. It's all about story. Ta-da. Isn't that crazy?
That's Oh God. These are the kind of, as you were sitting there saying all that, I'm thinking to myself, no, simple. The old KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Yes, Conrad, it is. And I will say, and I've said this over and over and over, Russo is a writer of television. There's a difference between a writer and a booker. And when you lean too far on the writing, you get in the situation where nothing is announced for the following week. When you lean too far in the booking and you just book and here's 6 matches next week, well, then there's no story.
Right.
It's finding that balance. It's truly easier said than done, but it really is finding the balance.